Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we read through St. Faustina's diary. Join me, Amy Thomas, each day for a short reading out of the diary which brought us a deeper understanding of Christ's divine mercy. Hello, Catholic pilgrims. Welcome to day 125 of our readings from St. Faustina's diary. So today we are done, at least for now. I don't know what's coming down the pipeline, but for now we are pretty much done with reading about how this new congregation devoted to the Divine Mercy is going to function, and we're moving on now. Sister Faustina does have a vision today about a building that is in disarray and disrepair, and it kind of made me think of, since my time here in Turkey, I have been to many Catholic churches that were built hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago that are now just piles of rubble. And there's a tendency to maybe think of this in a very sad way, but it hasn't made me sad, and I'm going to try and explain why when we're done with our readings. So today we are reading from Notebook 2, numbers 559 through 564. On one occasion, when I entered the chapel, I saw the walls of a building in a state of disrepair, a torn-down building. The windows were without panes, and the doors had only frames with no paneling. Then I heard these words in my soul: "This is where the convent will be." I was a little disappointed that these ruins were to be the convent. Thursday. I felt urged to undertake as soon as possible the task which the Lord was asking of me. While making my confession, I was holding to my own opinion over that of the confessor. At first, I did not realize this, but when I was making my holy hour, I saw the Lord Jesus as he appears in the image, and he told me that I must repeat to my confessor and my superiors everything he says to me or asks of me, and do only what you receive permission to do. And he gave me to know how displeased he was with persons who are self-willed, and I recognized that I was one of these. I saw this shadow of self-will in myself, and I threw myself in the dust before His Majesty, and with a broken heart begged His pardon. But Jesus did not let me remain in this state for long. His divine gaze filled my heart with such joy that I have no words to express it. And Jesus gave me to know that I should ask Him more questions and seek His advice. Truly, how sweet is the look of my Lord! His eyes penetrate my soul to its most secret depths. My spirit communicates with God without any word being spoken. I am aware that He is living in me and I in Him. All at once I saw the image in some small chapel, and at that moment I saw that the chapel became an enormous and beautiful temple. And in this temple I saw the Mother of God with the infant in her arms. And a moment later the infant Jesus disappeared from the arms of His mother, and I saw the living image of Jesus crucified. The Mother of God told me to do what she had done, that even when joyful, I should always keep my eyes fixed on the cross. And she told me that the graces God was granting me were not for me alone, but for other souls as well. When I see the infant Jesus during Holy Mass, it is not always the same. Sometimes he is very joyous, and sometimes he is not even looking at the chapel. At present, he is often very joyful when our confessor, Father Sapotsko, offers Holy Mass. I was greatly surprised that the infant Jesus loves him so much. Sometimes I see him dressed in a colorful pinafore. Before I came to Vilnius and met this confessor, I once saw a rather small church, and near it, this congregation. The convent had 12 cells. Each nun was to live separately. I saw the priest, Father Sapotsko, who was helping me to prepare the convent and whom I was to meet some years later, but whom I already knew from the vision. I saw how he was arranging everything in the convent with great care, assisted by another priest, probably Father Wojciechowski, whom I had not yet met. I saw the iron grating covered with a dark curtain, and the sisters did not go out to the church. On the feast day of the Immaculate Conception of the Mother of God during Holy Mass, I heard the rustling of garments, and saw the most Holy Mother of God in a most beautiful radiance. Her white garment was girdled with a blue sash. She said to me, "You give me great joy when you adore the Holy Trinity for the graces and privileges which were accorded me." And she immediately disappeared. So since being in Turkey, I have visited many ruins of Catholic churches here on the western part of Turkey and also some in the middle of Turkey. And as you know, Turkey, which was Asia Minor, used to be a big stomping ground for the apostles and many, many saints in the very early days of the church. Like I've probably told you before, St. John the Apostle was here. St. Paul was here. He was born here in what is modern day Turkey in Tarsus. Our Mother Mary came with St. John and lived not far from where I am. We have St. Irenaeus and St. Basil and St. Polycarp. And it's just a very important area to our Catholic faith, which is not something that I realized before our coming here. And in coming here, something that I learned was that the 7 churches that St. John the Apostle wrote to in the book of Revelations are here in Turkey. And they're all very, very close to me. I live in one of the cities that he wrote to, in Izmir, which is ancient Smyrna. And I visited, 4 of the 7 churches. I'm still missing 3, but the plan is to do a 7 churches tour here very soon. The thing that's sad is only here in Izmir, in ancient Smyrna, this is the only place where there is actually a Catholic community. Out of the 7 cities that were written to, this is the only one that remains. All the rest are in ruins. Ephesus is in ruins. Laodicea is in ruins. Pergamum is in ruins. And so I have been and seen these ruins. In a way, it's a little sad to know that, it's not Christian here anymore. I think the Christian population is like 0.03% or something very small like that. It might be 0.3%, but either way, it's teensy tiny. And so, this isn't a Christian/Catholic country any longer, where once it was. I have been to the middle of Turkey and seen the underground churches and caves where many early Christians were hiding during the early Roman persecutions, and they were doing whatever it took to celebrate the Eucharist. As I've gone into these ruins and seen them, like I said, in one way it makes me sad because the Catholic Church does not have a presence here any longer. For whatever reason, if we're not evangelizing well enough, or, we're going up against something that's very difficult, it's not here and it's not prolific. But on the other hand, it doesn't make me super sad, and I'll tell you why. Because this isn't our final place. The church as a whole, as a spiritual community, cannot be removed from this earth. Buildings may crumble. Catholic communities may have to move out of certain areas in order to survive, but no enemy can destroy that. And so while I see these buildings in ruins, it doesn't make me super sad because I know that God's kingdom is victorious and it's not just meant for here. And there's no power on earth that can remove the spiritual body of the church. So in that way, it doesn't make me super sad. Going into these ruins, kind of gives me a connection with our past brethren who celebrated the Eucharist in these buildings. And I love getting in touch with that, even if the buildings don't have a lot of walls or, windows or stained glass windows anymore. It's still a way to be in touch with them. When I was in the Holy Land, I was very surprised that a lot of the churches were not as old as I thought they would be. The location of them was very old. There had been churches built up there in the early centuries, but because of crusades and wars and all that, they had been reduced to rubble and had to be rebuilt. And so a lot of the churches that we went into weren't nearly as old as, say, some of the churches in like France or Poland or something like that. Like I said, the location of the church was very old and the significance of where that church was very old, but the structure itself was not super old like I was expecting. I was expecting like these super ancient churches, and they had all been reduced to rubble because of different conflicts. So today, Sister Faustina has a vision. And she has this vision that the new congregation is going to be built out of kind of an abandoned building. I don't know for sure if it was an old chapel or an old church. It was hard to kind of gather that from the readings. But for whatever, she has this vision and she sees it in, disrepair, and there's no windows there and the panelings are gone and it's fallen apart. And she's a little disappointed that this is where her new congregation is going to come from. But I think this is something that's important for us to think about. Like I said, buildings will come and go. Churches will come and go. The great Notre Dame Cathedral caught fire a couple of years ago in France, and that was devastating because it's just a magnificent church and it's so beautiful, and the craftsmanship and all of the sacred things that were held within that church, it just, kind of makes you just want to cry thinking about it being burned. And they are trying to restore it, but at the same time, we have to remember churches will come and go. And from the ashes, Christ can make new things. And he will make new things. Just like in the Holy Land, people have come and built new churches. And just like with Notre Dame Cathedral, people are coming and restoring. And just like our souls, sometimes our souls are just in shambles and falling apart and dark and in crumbles. But if Christ wants to make it great again, he will make it great again. And if we invite Christ into our soul, he'll clean up the mess and it will be glorious again. And so going and seeing churches that maybe are not active anymore or are in ruins or have been abandoned, there's a tendency to maybe despair a little because, oh gosh, what's happening to the faith? And I don't want us to feel that way. I want us to know that a building is just a building. And if Christ wants it to stand, it will stand. And if he lets it fall, then it will fall, but it will be rebuilt somewhere else. And God will make it great. And he does the same thing with our souls. And that's the most important thing to take from this. Nothing on earth can get rid of the church as a body of believers and as the spirit of the church and the body of the church in that supernatural way cannot be destroyed. It lives on in us and our spirit. And though hell may try its hardest, it cannot win. So I just wanted to give you that hopeful, encouragement today to not despair when you see those things. I kind of thought, going to these ruins here in Turkey that I would feel a lot of despair. And while I'm sad that Turkey isn't, Catholic anymore, I haven't despaired. And I don't quite understand why, other than the fact that I have hope that God will make it anew in his time and in his way. And I just have to trust in that. So that's all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. Tomorrow is day 126, and I will see you back here. Until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.